Welcome to Where Are They Now? We reach into the archives of Lenape, Shawnee, Cherokee, and Seneca High Schools and invite selected alumni to share memories and fill us in on their career paths after commencement. Since Lenape's first graduating class in 1961, Shawnee's in 1972, Cherokee's in 1978, and Seneca's in 2005, over 65,000 individuals have received diplomas from these four schools. Here now is your host, DJ Dini.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Where Are They Now? Today we will be reconnecting with an alum from Cherokee's class of 1985, Denise Fuhs. Denise is a news design editor for the New York Times and currently lives in New York City. Welcome to the show, Denise.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Let's go back, Cherokee 1985. I know everybody says, wow, that was so long ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. What was high school?
In this case, it kind of was.
No, it's not that long. What was high school life like at Cherokee in 1985?
I loved high school when I was there, I don't know, I was all about my sports mostly, and we had some good teams, especially in softball, and I don't know, it was fun. I had a good time. I had a lot of good friends, and
Well, you obviously kept busy. I have your activities here, and I needed like the whole sheet of paper to fill it out. Field hockey for 4 years, basketball for 4 years, softball for 4 years, FCA for 2 years, student council for 3 years, class officer for 2 years, band for 2 years, scout for 3 years, scribe for 2 years, and National Honor Society for 3 years.
sounds about right.
So when did you go to class? Like, how did you have time to go to class?
Well, when the bell rang.
You just kind of fit it in between all the activities?
I mean, it was actually good, I think, to do a lot. And it helped me in the future, and I think I've always done that, to do a lot of things at once, helps you manage your time, and and I didn't want to cut out the stuff that was fun, like sports and things, so I don't know, I just managed somehow.
Well, there's an expression, I think it says, the people that do the most truly do the most, because they have to organize their time and they actually get everything organized as opposed to just having a few things. But you were definitely more involved sports-wise.
Yeah.
You started to mention some of the teams that you had. I know a lot of your coaches were influential. Talk a little bit about some of your teams and your successful championship runs and your coaches.
Okay. Well, my coaches, all of my coaches were influential in some way. It would be hard to say this one was more than the other, but Jim Caputo, who was our softball coach, which he may be one of the most winningest coaches, in the area. I don't know, but he won a lot, and we won a lot when we were there. And but it was kind of almost like that was your life for a while. Like, it was very intense and in a good way. But I mean, we practiced a lot. We worked hard. We always did a lot of things together.
A lot of traveling to tournaments and that type of stuff.
And because we were in the state tournament a couple of times that I was there. We actually won a couple times that I was there. We had some really good teams. But he was really into the camaraderie of it and just like, one unit, be one unit. And we, I don't know, it was very, you felt a part of something. You felt like it was really special. And we had some really good teams. I mean, I was always proud to be from Cherokee, and sometimes we would come in with our music blasting and be all, the Cherokee people song.
Pride, right?
So maybe we're a little obnoxious to other teams, I don't know, but
you're confident.
It was fun, and you felt like you were a part of something. And and field hockey, I love the sport of field hockey. I think we won a couple things, but like maybe division or something. I can't remember, it was a long time ago. But those teams were great. Joanne Coyle was our coach then.
I think she retired. I'm not sure what year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she probably did. But Killer Coyle, we called her, because she was tough and made us run a lot. And but I don't know. I made a lot of friends through sports, and that's kind of always. Basketball was fun too. I just wasn't very good at it.
That was like your third sport.
I don't
Keep
know.
you in shape for
yeah,
softball,
I just felt like I always wanted to play something, and fortunately I was able to make the teams. And basketball was really fun just because the people were cool too. And, I don't know. And Mrs. Orzakowski was our coach, Vicki Orzakowski.
And she just retired recently, I think. Yeah, so she was around for a while. Now, so obviously you were very busy during high school. When did you kind of decide that you obviously wanted to pursue writing? Did you decide that when you were in high school?
Well, I always, yes and no. I mean, I always kind of wrote things, poetry, or I wrote some stuff for the yearbook. I wrote some stuff in the literary magazine.
Right.
I always kind of wrote poetry and things like that. But I didn't really necessarily think that would be a career. At one point, I wanted to be Barbara Walters, and I thought, because I wanted to be on TV and be a star. And I don't know, it just people used to say that I, had talent writing, so I thought, well, maybe I could do something with that. I think at one point I wanted to be like a cartoonist and do things like that, or maybe go into advertising. I kind of just fell into, where I am now.
So you knew you wanted to major in communication?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I thought about teaching for a while because, you know this, but like all my whole family teaches. They all taught in this district, actually, and my sister still does. And so I kind of felt like, oh, I should be a teacher because I wanted to coach, and but it just didn't. It wasn't me. I think.
Right.
I think I'm better writing than talking or standing in front of a class, and so it just didn't work out that way.
Now, who were some of the teachers that you mentioned? Obviously, having coming from a family of education, I think that's a different breed for a lot of people. They're not used to seeing it all the time.
Right.
You have a whole family that does it, and then you also go to school and you see it there too. Who were some of the teachers besides the educators in your family that influenced you? That besides the coaching aspect.
Right. I think, probably, and maybe this is because I was a writer or whatever. My English teachers mostly. The ones that come to mind are Mr. Wilson. I think his first name was Bruce. I don't.
He was my English teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And just kind of because he was a little wild and
Yeah.
thought out of the box and did things that were crazy. Like, well, if you had him, do you remember him doing? I think he did Jackson Browne or something. He would play music, and we were supposed to listen to the lyrics as poetry or something like that.
He did things that weren't kind of like the normal.
Right. And he was really good, I think, at sparking conversations and things like that. So I don't know. I just, I tend to like the teachers that are a little different. And like Judy Colvin was another one,
Right.
who was, very a powerful kind of influence to me. I don't know why, because she was very much herself, and I don't know. She kind of made you realize that you could think out of the box, or you could be a little different, and it was fine. I don't know how to say it.
She was an English teacher also.
She was an English teacher also. I had her for creative writing or something. And she was very encouraging about my writing and stuff, which helped, I think, because I was a little insecure about it. Like, I always like to write, but you never think you're
right, and you're
any
not sure how good you are, right?
Right, and I had a lot of respect for her, and she thought I was decent, so that meant a lot to me. I don't know.
Gave you a little more confidence
Yeah.
to continue to do it.
And I think Mr. Wilson also did some of the media stuff. Like,
Right.
I don't know what you guys have now, but at the time I think there was a mass media class, and
Right.
so I think even then I kind of was steering toward some
He
kind
kind of always,
media.
I think, did other stuff like public speaking. It always seemed like he was integrating other parts or aspects of communication into an English class.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was probably something that kind of sparked your interest as well. So when you started looking at schools and where you finally decided to go, take us through that process and how, where you ended up.
Well, it's not as admirable as I'd like to admit, because I mostly wanted to play sports.
Right.
And I, not that I didn't care about my academics. I mean, I did, but I mostly wanted to go somewhere where I could play something. And I ended up going to Ryder, which is a Division I school still, but mainly because they were going to let me play both. Like, I was recruited for softball and field hockey.
Okay.
And there weren't that many schools really that, a lot of the schools like Trenton State or UConn, Syracuse, some of the others I was looking at really wanted you to concentrate on one or the other. And I could have done that, but I, appreciated that I could play both. So.
Right.
And I got a scholarship, so I ended up going there.
Obviously, you accomplished some goals there. What were some of your accomplishments at Ryder Athletically?
I won a couple of. I was on the all-star team for field hockey, but our softball teams again. See, I think I just got really lucky to go to Cherokee and then go to Ryder when they happened to have really good teams. When I was at Ryder, we actually won our conference all 4 years I was there, and I think they won the year after. And the last team I was on, we just got inducted into the Ryder Hall of Fame, the Athletics Hall of Fame, because we had the winningest record or something of a softball team.
Wow.
But it was a big deal that we won the conference 4 times. I mean, we never got to get an NCAA bid. I don't really know how that works, but like we never got to go to the World Series or anything. But they have a good communication school, and a couple teachers there were influential to me, as far as just giving me confidence and leading me in the right direction. I don't know.
Specific subject area, or was it all?
I
most of these
I
teachers?
majored in communications. Most of the people were communications people, or like my speech teacher was, I had kind of trouble speaking in front of people. Not that I really have to now that much, but and they helped give me confidence to do that. And,
Good skills
you know.
for just for interviews, for things that
Yeah.
you would need to do.
Yeah, and I actually had one teacher there that was very into politics, and before college I really wasn't,
Right.
and now I very much am, and that was kind of my foray into it. Like, she had this class, I think it was, now I'm really dating myself, I think it was like the '88 presidential
Right.
election. They had
So
a class that you concentrated on
Bush
the election.
number one? Was it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I'm not telling who I voted for.
Okay.
That's
probably best.
Yes, it is in this case. But it was, you know, kind of got me into politics and thinking about those kind of things. And like now, later in life, when that's a big part of my job sometimes,
Right.
you know, I appreciate that she got me interested in it. When I graduated, like when many people graduated now, there weren't a lot of jobs.
Right.
So I pretty much just took what I could get, and it happened to be a newspaper job. At some little tiny paper in Cherry Hill, which I
Okay.
don't think exists anymore, but and I started as a reporter. I hadn't really done much reporting because in college I, you know, only worked on the college newspaper
Right.
occasionally to do copy editing. I wrote a couple things maybe.
So how did that experience help you, this Cherry Hill?
Well, it was my first newspaper basically, and you know, it was such a small paper. It was a group of weeklies, and they had one in Marlton actually, and they had one in Haddonfield. I worked on the Haddonfield paper. I think it was called the Haddon Gazette.
Okay.
But you know, you had to do everything. So you had to report. You know, you had to be a reporter, write your story, lay out your section. You know, sometimes paste up, which they don't even do anymore. Which,
Right.
you know, so it taught me, and we had to take our own photos. And
So you got very multi-dimensional
yeah,
getting to do
and
that.
so you learned a little about everything. And so slowly through my career, each of those things had helped me. You know.
And probably a lot less pressure because it was a smaller paper as far as
Right,
like
right.
deadlines and that type of stuff. All right,
And
so-
sometimes I did really bad because, like, I didn't know what I was doing. And I
Right.
remember covering one story at Haddonfield, and you know, it went to print or whatever. And the next day, the mayor called me and was like, you know, I had gotten something. You know, I shouldn't even admit this; I'll get fired from the Times. But it was
We'll cut
something
this part out.
really silly. Like they were talking, kept saying river, river, and so I wrote it as river when it was like River Street or something.
Oh.
Like you know, so you learn those lessons,
Right.
and it was good to learn that
Better
in a
there than
small
some-
paper
right.
with, you know, maybe 50 people reading it, but
Right.
to have the mayor call me, and you know, it was a lesson I learned that you don't want the mayor calling you, telling you screwed something
Right.
so minute up, you know.
Right. So from there, where did you move on to?
I worked at the same time, part-time at the Courier Post.
Okay.
As a sports copy editor, and that kind of was a fluke. I was working for this other newspaper, which happened to be a Gannett paper as well. I don't know if you know newspapers,
Right.
but that's a pretty
On
big.
the same group, yeah.
Yeah. And so they were affiliated with the Courier Post too. And so at one point we had a softball game, and I was playing softball, and the sports editor from the Courier Post, like, just noticed how I was playing or something, and came up to talk to me, and turns out he was like, oh, I'm looking for a copy editor. Would you like to be one? And I'm like, I guess.
Right.
So I started working part-time for them, and
Okay.
so that helped too. And then from there I went all kinds of different ways. Ended up eventually at the Record, the Bergen Record, which is in
Okay.
Hackensack, and then the Times.
So you started moving your way.
Yeah, and I
up-
worked
up
in the
North
Trenton Times. Yeah, I basically
Up
started
state.
moving up the state and went across the river. So
Okay.
it's not like I was one of those people, like a lot of people at the Times and other places, are always wanted to work there.
Right.
It's not that I didn't respect the Times, I just never thought of it. I mean, we're
Right.
from South Jersey. I thought maybe the Enquirer, if I'm that good, you know. But I never really thought of it. It just happened, you know.
And a lot of people go like totally across country to to a
Right.
small market and then try to come back, but you kind of like moved north. Now you're at the New York Times, a news design editor. What exactly does your job entail?
Well, I actually just got a new job.
Okay.
I just got a promotion.
Okay.
Yes, and,
Congratulations.
thank you. I just started. Now I'm basically on the job as news. I don't even know my title now.
Oh, that makes two of us.
Assistant news editor. That's right.
Okay.
And I'm on the news desk, which at the Times is basically the desk that kind of oversees the newsroom.
Okay.
So there, you know, the Times is a big place, and they have, you know, like every section's a different department: foreign, metro, national, business, sports, you know, arts, whatever. The news desk is kind of the desk that you know,
Oversees
just
all of it.
oversees everything, and we kind of just, you know, make the decisions what goes on A1, you know, really scrutinize, especially the stories on A1, you know, to make sure they're balanced and,
Right.
you know, or what we want them to be, saying what we want, you know. So it's a little different than what I was doing before, which was working just on one section, national, and I did politics, and basically it was coordinating what was going into the paper, like cutting things out that didn't fit, being a liaison with the, the words editors, the picture editors, the graphics people, I don't know how else to explain it. But.
So basically, you've taken your job that you had and made it multifaceted over several sections of the paper for the most part.
Yes, kind of.
Okay.
I mean, this is kind of a different job in that I'm more involved in the, the word part of it. Where before I was kind of doing both, like editing and design and graphics and layout.
Right. Overall, the whole
Yeah.
overall look. Okay. Now, I guess a question I've always kind of thought was interesting, as far as this medium, how have you seen what you do change in the last, 15 to 20 years, with with how much computers are used, and I mean, honestly, a lot of people don't even buy physical papers as much as they did when you started. They're out getting it all online, or they're subscribing, right? Well, but I mean, but that's a big consumer base now, is actually getting the subscription online as opposed to getting them to just have it delivered. What have you seen change?
A lot, and I've been at the Times now 15 years, and slowly we've been changing, but in the last, say, 5 years, it's really been a lot. In the last couple years, it's been even more. We don't know what's going to happen with newspapers. Like you said, most people probably get most of their news online now. And I think the Times we've been concentrating on that for a while. I think we were concentrating on making that shift before a lot of other places, or, earlier, so that we wouldn't get caught, not being prepared. But so over, I would say, the last 5 or more years, we've been making the transition to get more stuff online faster, but it's hard, because it's still two very separate kind of things. I mean, it's the same news content, but to put out a paper and to, have a successful web presentation are two totally different things. So we've had to, rearrange a lot of the staffing. We need people with some different skills. I'm
sure there's whole new departments that weren't even there before.
And it's kind of scary in some ways for some old school journalists, like I consider myself. I mean, because we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if there's going to be a newspaper, a physical newspaper, for the 10 more, 15 more years I have to work. And some of it is, now that people get so much online from all kinds of sources, I think we struggle with, hoping people realize what quality is, and accuracy. A lot of times now, I think
people worry about getting it first.
Yeah, people want it
right.
up there, and then they can correct it later. Oh, there were 10 dead in this accident, and then later, oh, sorry, there were only 6. And the Times, we really will not put stuff up unless we can verify. So a lot of times we end up a little behind. Like everybody else has it, why don't we? Well, because we haven't been able to verify there were 10 dead. And sometimes we've, it's worked in our favor that everyone else was wrong and we weren't, because we waited. But there's a lot more pressure to get it up as fast as you can and edit it later. And it's a difficult transition for us. We're trying to get faster. We're trying to get more concentration on getting it up, more quickly, rather than just whenever your press deadline is, you know.
Now, have you noticed, you said obviously it's a concern for people, old school, type of philosophy, that it may go a totally different direction or whatever, but from the same side, or the other side rather, isn't it also require more people to get more out? You know what I mean? Like, because it's happening more often.
Yes.
So,
yes, and we have, in some areas we've had to hire a lot more people, web producers, people that know a lot about the technologies of the web, and we've had recently, a lot of committees trying to figure out what readers want, what users want, because we have to figure out how to get people to come to our story. Like a paper, you get a subscription, you're getting it,
Right.
If you're looking online, like, you could be looking at any site for your news, and so it's a real challenge, and there are people working on this to try and figure out, if somebody's looking for information on this subject, how do we get them to come to the Times?
Right.
And it's tricky, but also we haven't quite learned how to make as much money online yet. Like print advertising is basically your revenue for a newspaper.
Right.
advertising online is not the same. And so that's part of the struggle, is how to do it with more resources, but maybe not making as much money at first.
Right.
You know, it's a very challenging time for the industry, but I feel like I've been through these kinds of things, not as dramatic as this, but you know, in the time I've been in the newspaper business, I've seen many times when, oh, newspapers are going away,
Right.
oh, this paper's folding. Even the Inquirer had a lot, you know, a lot of papers have downsized, a lot
Right.
of, you know, I'm hopeful that people will still want good journalism and will still look for it, and I think
It's
that's
just different.
true. Yeah, and I think that's true, and I think, you know, it's not like people aren't reading anymore, you know, they just might not want that physical newspaper.
Right. Now, little, I guess, put you on the spot. What's your favorite part of your job?
I like knowing about things in the world. I mean, I like reading about stuff. I like, you know, I like editing, and I like, I feel like I have good news judgment, and I like being a part of decisions and what goes where and what's important and what's not, and because it's not always like the biggest story. You know, sometimes you have to think, well, not everybody wants to read about Ukraine, or not everybody,
Right.
you know, somebody might want to read about, you know, Britney Spears or something, and you have to balance that. It's not
Right.
always like necessarily the top, you know, #1 in news value stories. It's also a mix of what readers want, and, you know, there might be something interesting in business and something interesting in sports, and I don't know. So I like being a part of that. I like knowing what's going on.
Well, it's kind of like you said with your first job being multifaceted. It sounds like, you know, you still carry that on and like wanting to be kind of well-rounded in all the different areas of news.
Yeah.
It seems to be
I
a
try
theme.
to be, and I think that I'm hoping that in the long run, versatility will help, especially since we don't know the direction that the newspaper industry is going, you know, and I think the more skills you have or the more things you can do or understand, then, you
More
know,
valuable you
survival
are, yeah.
rate might be better.
Absolutely. So obviously the way news is delivered has changed a little bit, but it's news is news. You know, it's still stories. And over the years at the New York Times, you've been very successful at, I guess, getting that news to people. Can you tell me about some of your accomplishments while you've been at the Times?
Well, I've worked on a lot of big stories. Obviously, the one that always comes to mind is 9/11, because you know, that was just a very tough time to be in the city, and you know, in some ways, it was good to have a job like this because we had to work. You know, obviously the paper came out. We did a lot of really good coverage of 9/11. We actually had a whole section for, I think, more than a year that was called The Nation Challenged, and the whole section was dedicated to the, you know, 9/11 news, and we had these profiles. This was one thing that was really difficult to work on, the profiles of every single person who died. They were called Portraits of Grief. They actually did a book about it. You know, it was just little snippets, like they were like 3 paragraphs long, but it was like, you know, little details about every single person that had died in the towers or in the Pentagon. And, you know, but the good thing about having to work is like you kind of had to push yourself along, so there was no time to be, you know, sad. I mean, it's
Right.
not like we weren't sad and it wasn't
Right.
emotional, but
You had
it
something
wasn't.
to occupy your mind.
Yeah, and it was like, I feel like for a lot of people, like they didn't know what to do with themselves
Right.
at that time. We didn't have to think about it, you just had to go to work. And, you know, sometimes that seems like, you know, what, you worked, you know, but it kept your mind off things, and
Right.
you were doing something important. I think the sections we put out, we actually ended up winning a Team Pulitzer for the Nation Challenge section, because there were a lot of things in there that, you know, were meaningful, like the Portraits of Grief.
Right.
And then, of course, I've worked on a lot of elections, including the Bush v. Gore hanging Chad election,
Right.
which went on forever and ever. You know, and the Boston Marathon bombing. I mean, there are a lot of big news stories I was involved in. And you're right, it's like the news isn't different. It's just the way that we do it.
And for the Boston Marathon, the Society for News Design Awards, that was one of the awards you won for that?
Yeah, there's this thing called the Society of Newspaper Design, and basically judges all newspapers across the country and you know, their print coverage. I think now they do video and digital and stuff too. And you know, it's just kind of a group that determines like what newspapers covered certain things well. And you know, I won a couple for election sections we had. and for the Boston Marathon bombing coverage.
The convention as well, right?
Yeah, oh, and the Republican, I think it was the Republican convention or the Democratic, I don't know, we did both. Because we would sometimes have special sections depending, like during the first Obama election was a big election because of the historic ramifications.
Right.
And so, you know, we did a whole section leading up to, you know, doing both conventions and leading up to the election. So, and I think some of it with the Times is, you know, we do politics heavy. I mean, we you know, really try and do a lot with that. So we often maybe have more than others. I don't know, but.
That's great. Take me through some of what you like to do, your personal life. What you know, what are your hobbies? What kind of activities do you like to do when you're not working?
Work, more
Right.
work. No, I don't know. I used to play softball. I don't play as much now because I hurt my shoulder. I don't know what I like to go to movies. I'm really into movies. You know, I read, but sometimes it's hard to read too much serious stuff after working.
Right.
Like I like to read sometimes just dumb fiction or something. I socialize. I have, you know, newspaper business. We have kind of weird hours. So it's like, you know, I work at night. I work weekends, holidays, you know, so sometimes it's difficult for social life. So I just really try and fit in people when I can so that I can see my friends, and I like to go to dinner and things like that, or plays, and, you know, I don't know, people. I just like to hang out with people.
Well, let's go back to high school before we finish up, and maybe give some advice to some of the people that are in high school now, some of the kids, some of the things that they may not realize now, but they will once it's over. Like
Oh,
some, you know,
gosh.
one of those things. What would you say to them?
I don't know. I guess be serious, but not too serious. I think it's much harder. I don't know because, you know, I'm not in the school system much, but I hear from my sister and people that are. I think it's much more difficult for kids today in some ways. Like I feel like there's a lot more pressure to, you know, get a head start, you know, start looking at colleges when you're 6. I mean, not
Right.
quite, but, and I think that's tough. And you have to do that now, but I think you have to try and keep a perspective that, you know, the decisions you're making now are not necessarily, you know,
Life-altering.
Right, exactly, because I think kids, you know, feel a lot of pressure. We did too in high school, but there's even more now. And, you know, I didn't know what I was going to do when I went to college, and, you know, I feel like it worked out okay. And I didn't even necessarily go to, you know, I didn't go to like an Ivy League school or anything. So I don't know, I just think go with your gut and work as hard as you can, but try not to let the pressure get to you.
Right.
And, you know, follow your heart.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's sometimes the balance that it's hard to find. I think even for adults, you know, like you have to do your responsibilities, but yeah, can't lose sight of the fact of how important it is.
And you want to have fun. I mean,
Right.
I thought high school was really fun, and, you know, I did a lot of things, and I think you should do as much as you can, and, you know, while you're in high school, because, you know, you don't always have as much time when you get out, and it's not as easy to play, you know, like now, like in my 40s,
Right.
you know, it's not as easy to find a team to play on or find time to do it, or, you know, I don't know. I just think you should do as much as you can and try not to get as stressed about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure
Thanks for
talking to you.
having me.
No problem. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us as well. We've been talking to Cherokee alum Denise Fuhs, a news design editor, but now the assistant news editor for the New York Times. She currently lives in New York City. Thank you, and join us next time on Where Are They Now?